One of the key selling points for spiritual practice, spiritual devotion, a life dedicated to spiritual pursuit, has been the promise of eternal bliss. Eternal bliss. And I think there was a mistake in translation, because what I think we have really been promised in spiritual awakening is not eternal bliss, it's eternal this. Somehow the T and the B got confused. If you are looking for eternal bliss, who are you looking at it for? Who will be the beneficiary of that eternal bliss? And I will tell you that if the answer is you are wrong, and you will never have it. The idea of doing this for a reward is misguided, because the simple desire to have anything for you misses the central equation of spiritual practice, which is the freeing of you from yourself, from who you think you are. Everything in you that wants, everything in you that desires, everything in you that believes it can have and hold will be disappointed, possibly disappointed in the extreme. The real practice that we're doing is not to arrive at bliss, but truly, and trust me, it's to arrive at this, at this. And I know that throws up a big question mark in many heads. The this is such a defined space. It's such a documented, activated space. We think we know it. It is placed in time and space. It's part of the history of the world. It comes in at a particular time and date. It's a particular time of day. It has sunrise, sunset in it. It has the entire journey of the human race from conception to this moment. Where we are right now, in a certain sense, is structured into a kind of worldview that houses us and makes us somewhat comfortable or uncomfortable. But it tells us who and what and where we are. And the problem with all of that, and you don't know it really until you start to really surrender. And if you examine the construct of the world you're in, trust me on this, you have built that world. You have constructed it. I know a lot of other people and voices and forms in your manifested existence have contributed to that. Your mom and dad, your siblings, your classmates, your friends, your teachers have all begun to structure the world that you inhabit. And you bought it. And everyone has bought it. This is the world. The other part of the selling point has been the pleasure-pain part of existence. We build ourselves into seeking the pleasure part and avoiding the pain part. And so we construct this mechanism of self that interacts with time and space and existence and gives us a very specific narrative, a very specific ride. And we're all on our own ride, every one of us, and they are not as interlinked as we think they are. Even if they butt heads, even if we make love to the other, even if we come to go on the journey with friends and family, we are really not as connected to that as we think we are. The real journey is not defined as a search for bliss, to make all of these different stories and narratives and ideas and thoughts that we have finally arrive at a place of, oh, wow, that was worth it. Not to disappoint you, but in my experience, and let me tell you, it may not be the ultimate experience and it may not be the guide you're looking for. Fine with me. There are guides out there that will lead you, they say, to bliss, eternal. And I have no problem if you jump ship and ride on one of those trips to bliss. But I've understood in my own evolution that the most I can offer, and when I say I don't really mean Bruce, but the most I, this is the eternal evolving sense of presence and being, can do is bring you to this. Welcome to this. And welcome to this with everything in you that defines it in any way. And as I've been saying for the last few weeks, excuse me, this is defined by your reaction to it, by your wanting parts of it and not wanting other parts of it, by having the courage to do this part of it and the fear of that part of it. You have really built an enormously complex structure that is so you, so identified as you, that you rest in that space as best you can. But mostly it is filled with, and as I promise you as you get older, it will become filled with more and more discomfort, limitation, suffocation, static aspect, what's it all about aspect. You will arrive at all of these places because getting old takes away so much of your, excuse me, your identity with old structures and doesn't know what to do with them. They stand there in the field like fallen trees that never have been cleared from the property, or parts of walls that have fallen down that really look awful. Most of our identities, most of our lives as we get older become less and less substantive and more memory of what was, trying to hold on to old concepts and structures. And the reality is that you miss this. And what this is you without all of that. You without the trappings, You without the history, you without the belief systems, you without the dreams and hopes and ambitions of whatever it is. There is finally a time that comes, and those walls start to fall down and actually disappear. They go away. And what you start to find is that all of the stuff that defined you as a person, as a specific entity in time and space, is no longer a structure that works. All you are is this. And it is indefinable, undefinable, unknowable, miraculously present awareness of being, with so much going on in it and around it, a fullness and an emptiness, and a magic and a conciseness that it is not processable. You cannot process the what is. You simply are a witness to, and ultimately one with, all of it. Is there bliss in that? I think so. I would call it comfort. I would call it trust. I would call it awakened to not knowing anything, but trusting its absolute, unending wisdom to fill you and to empty you and to do what it will do, and to allow you, in some fundamental sense, to be one with it. Mostly, in my experience now, to serve it. Again, I'm going to be repeating myself probably week to week, so you can all sign off at any point, and it's fine. But the key message, in the simplest of all terms, is when all of that structure reactivity falls away, what remains is shockingly simple and best defined by words like kind, good, loving, accepting, allowing, surrendering. Those are the words that define it. And you find, at least I have, day by day, and I mean this concretely, I do nothing but let go. Anytime a reaction arises, I witness it, and I let go. And as I let go and I let go, this phenomenal awareness of this arises or appears, and doesn't even arise because it never has been anywhere. That's the great thing you realize. Nothing is coming that you didn't know. It's always been. It is what you are. It is what you have always been. Try to get rid of your story. Try to get rid of all of your stuff and see what remains. Parts of you remain. And parts of you function. Parts of you have warmth and goodness and kindness, and you are in a sense, a witness to and a servant of the ultimate goodness and kindness of being. That's really the best definition of this. And as long as you're manifested in the world, there is stuff to do. Now, I have to confess that I have arrived at a very strange moment in my own life. I knew it was coming. I don't know that I was prepared for it, but it has arrived. I've talked about this Neptunian idea that Bruce was going to be washed away all the egocentric minded stuff, and that what would remain would be the self, what is. And I think I had an idea of what that would feel like, and I had an imagination about what that would be like. But this week, which is really astrologically kind of the timing, it kind of completes itself somewhere around, interestingly, the inauguration. What I am having, what I am left with, is I have nothing left on my to-do list. Nothing. I have nothing to do. Period. I mean, there are little chores, maybe, I have. But in terms of the world, I'm not a creator. I don't make movies. I'm not producing children. I'm not raising children. The most of my to-do list is to be one with my wife. And that means really and deeply to serve her and love her, because she is my presence. But I don't wake up with a to-do list other than to hug her, say thank you, to give to her, to serve her, and not to find any of that old reactivity that goes, but what about me? But I don't really want to do that. All of that starts to break down into a kind of service. And what seems to be returning from that, and not planned, but it's a kind of unbelievable goodness and kindness reaching me from my wife. Blanche and I have arrived at this. We're a couple. We've been together 52 or 3 years. And we have learned over the course of time, through breaking down all of our stuff, to be kind to one another, to love one another, to be good to one another, and to wake up knowing that being that is all we have. What I have is everything you have, which is we wake up and there is a day ahead of us. How do we fill that day when there is nothing to do? Well, in some miraculous way, much of the day happens. I went for a long walk the other day because it was nice out, unbelievably nice, 70 degrees in upstate New York, 2 days after snow. And I went for this walk, and somewhere on the walk I felt a little lonely, and I wanted something, connection, and I was trying to do something spiritually, and a truck drives by, and the guy reaches out the window and goes, "Hey, Bruce," and he keeps driving. And I realize it's a guy I've met on one of my walks, introduced myself to, talked to, complimented his beautiful work in his garden. And at the moment I needed something, it arrived. I got back home, and a man who's coming to help us work on our house pulled in the driveway at the same time. And he's a person going through the death of a parent, a divorce, all these different things. And has always been very wound up, and has, through the process of going through this incredible suffering, begun to open somewhat and truly express his heart. And I stood there and I said, oh, now I am here for a reason. And I talked to him with so much love and kindness, and I could see he had this extraordinary response of being authentic, something he had not been able to do much of his life. And we just talked. And the talk arose in the same way as this talk is arising for you. And I could feel him getting lighter and lighter. And something in me knew, that's my work. That's what I do. My job is to serve, and I don't have to think about it. I don't have to arrange it so much. It arises. But then I got up on a number of days where nothing arose. So I just sat. And I realized something I talked about a little bit last week. You, we, each of us, can, when there's nothing there, reach out to the other. We can get on our cell phones, write a letter, an email, reach out to others because they're sitting there also not knowing what to do. Especially in this crazy time that we're in, where we're all, I think, and the ones of us who are being smart are being somewhat isolated, sometimes with others, sometimes totally alone. But trust me, yourself is a kind of other. You can actually be kind to yourself. You can be good to yourself. It's a real action that can be done. We can find ways to be, but being can mean calling, reaching out, connecting. It can be sitting quietly, reading a book. I have to do all these vocal exercises, and they are teaching me so many lessons. I've always wanted, you know this, I've always wanted to be a singer, and I have no voice. And this isn't exactly helping, but much of what my vocalizing is starting to do is to create almost operatic sound. And I am going, wow, I can do that. And it's the stupidest thing to do for 20, 30 minutes, but making sounds is so primal. I feel like a little baby. And I'm loving finding the voice. I don't want to get into details here, but what I'm trying to say is discovering this is shockingly powerful. And even if it's silent, and even if you don't know what to do to fill it, even if you don't have a plan or an objective, and most of you are young enough to still have those, but you will arrive very likely at a time like I've arrived at. I have friends who've arrived at, who simply wake up with nothing on the plate. It's not a moment to panic. It's not a moment to look back and say, what did I do or didn't do, or fear about what's in the future. It's a moment to be. To be. And the discovery of our practice is that as you sit and be, and you get quiet, and you just enter into yourself, you get this feeling of, oh, oh. And I'll tell you what's interesting about that. The this begins to become bliss. You can just sit in this. But the bliss is not for you. It is not your reward. It is your very being. It is the essence of what and who you are. This field of this comfort, and it's not excitable comfort. It's not sexually dramatic. It is really, it's like a huge thank you to the universe. It just is like, I don't understand why or how or what, but I know this much. There is this exquisite sense of being, and it's this. It's just this. And it's happening every second. There's never a moment without it. Now, if you want to get distracted from this, we have a society, we have a culture that allows for enormous distraction, so much so that you can find a way to not return to this. You can stay out there in the manifestation of stuff, defining and reacting and being whatever you want to be, tight and angry and hostile and worried and fearful and angry and all that stuff, or hopeful and ambitious and driven and all the various things. But if you have a practice and you know how to do it, and you get to the point of exhaustion with all of that, take a breath, sit down, open the door, go inside, and be with this. And be with this long enough so that the TH of this moves into the B of bliss. And you really find, okay. And you can sit there for a long time. You can sit there for a long time. You may not want to. It may tell you to get up and do something. It may tell you to go make a glass of orange juice. It may tell you to go to the bathroom. It may tell you to go for a walk. It may tell you to go hug the person you live with. I'm telling you, it has a directiveness that is very powerful. And if you pay attention and you don't resist or react, you will find that you are an enormous, blessed being whose whole purpose is to serve the being itself. I cannot tell you what that's like. I have arrived at this strange moment, at this date in time. Today is the 15th of November, the very middle of the month. I was told at this time my Neptunian journey was going to be basically coming to an end, and some kind of something goes on between now and January. But when I woke up with nothing to do, and I started to panic, and I looked at the panic as a reaction, and I took a breath, and I let it go. I went, okay. And then I just sat inside, and I got comforted. And the day went on. And then I got up from my chair, I went downstairs, and I hugged my wife, who's a little bit surprised now to be getting hugged so much. But I'm telling you, it's the thing that wants to happen. And the day enters and takes over. It's very funny. Awakening. And the idea of being special, the idea of being a graduate, the idea of attaining something, the idea of arriving at something, all of that stuff, as far as I can tell, and prove me wrong somewhere, I don't care. The awakening that's taken place for me is I have awakened to this. And the interesting thing is, none of us are not at one with this. None of us. The difference between awakening to this and not awakening to this is your own mind. You're being caught up in all the paradigms of thought and emotion and fear and drama and story and all of that. The only difference between you and I right now is I don't give a shit about that stuff. It's not important. It's over. Now, part of that's age, part of that's having finished the ride on many levels, which is fine. And you may want to wait 10 or 20 years before you kind of give this to yourself. But let me tell you, even during those 20 years that you're waiting, you will never be separated, ever, from this, unless you die. If you die, I'll throw this out quickly, death itself may not separate you from this. It may separate you from yourself, from your ego mind, from your story, from your narrative. Yes, death may do all of that. Most likely will. But if you've already come to the point where you are no longer bound by all of that stuff, then death from this is just moving to another this. You have to go through the biological struggle of that, the pain of that. That's real. And we're all going to have to deal with that at some point. And that will change the equation for however long that process is. But this is it. I believe this is eternal. I believe there is a moment of transition from this to another this. I had an image this morning of babies taking their first breath and starting to cry. And I had this image that the moment we die and we've had our last breath in this world, we enter another this and we go, and we're breathing again on the other side of this. Who knows? I don't care. That's the great thing about this journey into awakening, is that it frees you of all of your programmed reactivity, and you just become present tense, this, with everything else that's in it. You know, there's a Bruce history, there's family, there's people, there's all that stuff. But it's only as it arises in the present tense. That's all it is. It arises with all of its history, but it's just this. It's just this. And that's all that's happening for you. Whatever arises right now, today, is this. I know it has the weight of past tense. I know it has future projection, but trust me, it's this. And when you go to the core of this, the bliss shows itself. As I say pretty much at the end of every talk nowadays, I don't know that I have anything else to say. And I don't know who frees each one another first. Do you leave me? Do I leave you? Or do we just keep at this? I am going to be here as long as I'm told to be here. And I have no problem with that. And I really deeply understand if you think you've gotten it, if you heard it enough, you're tired of it, you don't want any more of this. I mean, I don't know where you're going to go to not be this, but good luck. But the nice thing about this, I talked about kindness and I talked about goodness. But let me throw out, there's so many other words, but let me just throw out love. Love. Each of you sitting here is being loved. Trust me. And it's not Bruce, although Bruce has an element in it. Bruce is being used to love you. That might be a reason to come back. I don't know how many people you get that love you, but I do. And I will. And I mean it. I mean it. I love you. And that I has a Bruce in it, and it has something else in it that has nothing to do with Bruce. And it's about whatever this is. It loves you. That's really important. It's part of the comfort you get when you go toward bliss. So, love to you all. I guess I'll ask for questions if any of you have any. I'm happy to try to answer them. I think I have to unmute you, which is something doesn't look like I have to do much. If any of you have a question, let me know. And if not, next time. Todd.
Bruce, I have a question. First of all, thank you for this. And I'm grateful to know that it seems like there's an infinite number of requests I can have to surrender. It seems like it's an unlimited number of times, which is beautiful. But my question is sort of about self-will. I notice at the beginning of meditation, I become disoriented. The Todd orientation loses itself. The compass spins until it disappears into the phantasmical, I guess, of what's really here. And then at some point, usually Todd wants to hang a shingle on that experience for a moment. I feel the constriction. I take a deep breath from my belly. I open my heart. I ask to surrender, and I return. And then at some later point, Todd wants to own something to the point where when you began speaking afterwards, I sneakily acquired the domain Eternal This, because that's what Todd does. You know, he wants to own these experiences. And it's yours, by the way, if you want it, just FYI. So how do you recommend, and I notice, I become aware, yes, there's this element of me that wants to insert my will. It seems like in the infinite, inserting my will is always a possibility. It's always an option. Sometimes it's at the beginning of the deck. Sometimes it disappears in the end of it. Any suggestions on how to keep it more at the end of the deck?
Everything you're describing is exactly process as I know it. The thing that has happened for me to a fairly large degree is I don't have to surrender anymore. It just is. The this is the this. Occasionally something comes up. If I feel Blanche and I have a moment that's conflicted, the this immediately comes into play to deflate the tension. And sometimes it feels like Bruce has arisen because it's reacted. And then the feelings sometimes happen, it's not being done for Bruce. It's being done out of love for my wife. And I watch it and I don't see any ownership of it. And I don't have to go, oh, there's a part of me that needs to be let go of. I discover there is the this reacting. It's very vast. It's very infinite, but it's also in many ways very personal. And the fact that it's both is so mysterious and mind-boggling, and yet the simple version of it that you finally arrive at is, it's not you. Just be. Just be and let it happen. And let it happen. And all these little shards of you coming back, okay, they won't last long. They'll be like little, filtering clouds moving through the sky. All you have to do, if you're serious about this practice, and I know you are, is watch this thing unfold and see the enormity of wisdom, the enormous wisdom that comes at your absence. You don't hold that wisdom. You are an obstruction to that wisdom. Not really an obstruction, but a limitation on it. And as you really do let go, this phenomenal knowing arises, but it's not yours. And you can't really hold it or take ownership of it because that will obstruct it on some level. And yet it comes through you. So if you want to become exalted by it, go for it. You can try to do that. My understanding of that is very few authentic awakened beings can do that. It simply cannot allow itself to be contained by a person. It can be expressed through a person, and it can be one with one's being, but in the end, it's all very, very simple. I pulled a picture out just before that I wanted to show you. I didn't find the time to do it, but let me just put it here. This is what it looks like. This is just total simplicity, guys. That's Nityananda. I didn't know him exactly. He's a guy who looks interestingly like me in terms of if you saw me in my underwear. Big head, which I'm thinking of doing. But he just was. He just was. And I'm talking about not knowing him at all, except through internal process. And as I understand, he was relatively reactive and relatively even critical of people who were not doing it or paying attention. That was his nature. That's not my nature. It's a very different nature. But my nature is tell the truth of my particular journey. And the journey that I am on, which you are all on, has not arrived at a place where I can walk around in my underwear and hundreds of people or thousands of people will gather around to hear what I have to say. That's not what I arrived at, nor do I particularly need that. All I'm going to do is live in this house, which is, as I've said many times, a very strange and new space for me. Ultimately beautiful, but how did I get here? And what is this? And I really am, after this past year, positioned in another time and space, but it's very much part of what is. It's this, and I have learned to go, and that's all I do. I just do that. And it's not even I do it. Truly, the biggest difference that I can describe on the journey right now is there's no more me having to do. It's just be. Be this. And again, I'm not trying to separate me out from the equation or to say this in a way that makes you feel like, how do I do this? How do I get there? The great spiritual teachings is you are there. And you are this already. The only thing you need to do is open your heart, open your mind, open your gut, take a breath, ask for help to surrender, be proactive in that. Try to let go of all of your constriction, all of your stuff, all of your certainty, all of your drama, all of that. Just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And it will take you in, and you will discover everything I'm saying is as much yours as it is mine. It's just, this is what it is. You are this. You are this. And this is going to take lots of forms, and you know, it's going to get complicated maybe, but there's just you and it, and really they're one thing. So it's a really, really fascinating ride for all of us. Not everybody arrives at this. And certainly not everybody arrives at bliss. But if you have any determination, most of you have known me a long time, and you've known and watched the journey. You know, I've got all the drama and all this shit and all this stuff that everybody else has. But honestly, it is falling by the wayside. And my reactivity is much less than it ever has been, to some degree non-existent. I just get the message and I do it. And I tell you, I mean, it's so simple. It's just wipe the counter, put the garbage in the garbage, do the thing in front of you, and listen to the voice that says, this, now this, now this, now this. And then you've arrived at eternal this, or bliss. Pretty simple. Okay, I've really pushed the boundaries here. Is there any other questions, or should we just say farewell? Okay. Love you guys. I will be back next week to the West Coast. And if all of you can handle another session in 2 weeks in a row, you're welcome to come back. Those of you who think this was enough to last you a few years or a month, I'll see you the next time. Okay? So I love you all, and thank you.